It's a privilege for me to spend some time with you on the stage. I had the privilege also to be on the Xerox board when Ann Mulcahy was CEO, and we went through the succession planning to bring Ursula on as our CEO. So it was an amazing transition, and Ursula is a terrific leader of Xerox and really transforming the company in a lot of different ways. So when you think about important decisions that you have to make in your daily life at Xerox, tell us a little bit about that process, that decision process you go through.
So before I answer that question, I have to be truly honest.
You know, she does this in the boardroom too,
Yeah.
you know? I'll ask her a question, she changes the subject.
Maggie is my boss, and being interviewed by your boss is always, you have to kind of mince your words. Most people say I'm authentic, but I think you also sit on the compensation committee.
I do, yes.
So I just want to make sure that you all know that.
But you have to know, backstage, she said to me before we came out, I know where you live.
I know where you live. So one of the things about decision making that's interesting is that it becomes almost like habit. It's muscle memory. And there was a great book, Malcolm Gladwell's book, this thing that he calls Blink. So a large amount of your decision making for big decisions and small decisions rely on this blink instinct. And the thing about blink is that it's a culmination of many, many, many years of experiences. Mm-hmm. So very rarely do I make decisions where I go back to my office and do analysis. It's, right. And if I do, I generally do analysis and come back to the first thought that came to my mind anyway. So I've learned to not do a whole lot of analysis. So generally, it is. You have facts and data presented to you. You have people that are credible speaking to you, which has a lot to do with whether, what decisions you make, whether the person speaking to you is someone that you can trust, not only in their ability to manage the business, but in their, what I call soul and alignment to the company. These things together actually allows me to make generally relatively quick decisions. Often, though, the business-based decisions are right, good, backed up by some, like I said, blink decisions. The places that I make the biggest mistakes are on people. Just about every single error that I can actually trace that's something that's discernible in the business is I've done something wrong with a person. I've either stayed too long with a person or moved too fast on a person, which I'm sure we'll get back to at some point.
Yeah. When we talk about leadership, it can take many forms, and it can be situational. When you think about the most important characteristics of leadership, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, so first is authenticity. And we have this thing at Xerox, the Xerox table will know that I say all the time that you have to bring your whole self to work. My predecessor, who I admire immensely, her name is Ann Mulcahy, said to me before I became CEO, she had two things to me. One is, Ursula, you cannot be Ann. You have to be Ursula. The company needs Ursula now, not an Ann now, which was interesting to me because Ann was very well loved in the company. She was an icon in the company, and so the natural thing would have been to me to try to follow in her footsteps. And she said that we don't need an Ann anymore, we need an Ursula now. That was one thing. And the second thing that she said to me that took a lot was that who you are is what we're looking for. It's the same as the first, but who you are is what we're looking for. So basically, she would say all the time that you should never let the people see you sweat. And I remember saying back to her, I think exactly the opposite. You absolutely have to let the people see you sweat. If they don't see you sweat, they don't have a clue about what you're worried about. Right? So my team will know when I'm concerned because I absolutely act like I'm concerned. And that's
I'm going to be watching for this from now on, this sweating stuff. Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing so I think being authentic is one of the most important things. I mean, you have, generally, when you interview for a person or you get into a position, all of the things that you can check on the bio was done, right? So you've held jobs, if you're a CFO, you've run treasury, whatever. So you have, all those things are screened for already. That's what I call the fitness things. The things that are really the place that the biggest gaps are created is in the fit things. whether or not you can fit in an organization. And that's where most of the time, most of my time is spent, in making sure that we can actually all fit together as a team. Because we definitely have, and we hire, just like Frontier, like most of the companies out here, very, very talented people from all of the great schools with all of the great experiences. And so we don't hire dummies, but not all companies work well together, and the reason why is because they don't have great fit. And that's what I look for.
So let's stay on that team theme. So John Wooden said, and we heard tonight, that a player that makes the team great is better than a team player.
Yeah, it's a huge
so
thing.
when you think about candidates for your team or the organization, how do you think about that?
It is 100. So this is it. A player who makes a team great is more valuable than a great player. I opened to this page because that is hiring. This is exactly what you have to hire when you hire for a company.
Absolutely.
It is really not about whether or not you have a superstar. But actually, often if you have a superstar, you have a problem, right? Because they are, just about everybody thinks they're a superstar. They can't play well with others. They don't have great manners. They're not great team players. So a lot of what we have to do is figure out a way to get the best out of everybody on the team. And that's what it's this thing called fit. It's more than fitness for me.
So think back of your early days in your career, and you were a terrific leader coming into Xerox with a great degree, into a company that had a huge legacy, and a transformational environment then too. So how do you think about role models when you were first getting started in your career? And give the audience a sense for how those people or persons have impacted you over the years.
It's interesting. In work, so the natural role models are people who look like you. We had none. I had none. Like zero who looked like me. So I had to find role models in a different way. By the way, growing up, this is something I practiced growing up, because when I was growing up, I went to an all-girl Catholic high school, and I went to a Catholic grammar school in New York. And then I moved from that all-girl Catholic high school to an engineering school in Manhattan that was essentially all male. So I had to figure out a different way to look at these role model people, because they obviously weren't look and feel role models. They were other things you get to latch on to. There were either gaps. I found role models in either people who I admired because they did things so much better or differently than I did. And so I tried to learn, become a leech almost, and learn what they did, or who did things a lot like I did, the same method, same process, and so they were reinforcing to me. So I had these two different groups of people that I actually tracked. The number one role model for me was my mother, and everybody says that their mother is a role model. My mother was really a role model. She had unbelievable tenacity, and unbelievable focus. And these two things, whenever I get stuck, which happens often, I have to kind of step back and say, think about what Mom would have done, who had very little education, a lot less education than I did. And she had very little money, significantly less money than I did, no connections whatsoever, and she figured out a way to do better. And so I always have to step back and look at that as a role model. And then as I moved more and more up into leadership positions and broader experiences in the company, I found people who actually did things better than I did in places that I had big gaps. One of the people who spoke up there, and he's over there, his name is Ken Chenault. I'm on his board, and Ken if Ken and I were in a room together, you would see I would be pinging off a wall like at just unbelievable frequency, and Ken would be as calm as the day is long. The building would be burning, and Ken would walk out calmly and get all of us to walk out calmly behind him, and I would be 9-1, I'm the type 10. Everybody line up, let's go to the door, no screaming. And I always watch Ken because his style is so different. And if I can get a little bit of learning from him, that would be great. So I find these role models generally in people who have attributes that I admire, that I do very poorly. And I try to figure out how they work. One of the people who I admire is Maggie. Maggie, this is the ultimate kiss up, right? Remember I told you, well, I haven't said this to her before.
All right, bring it on,
yeah. The thing I like about Maggie is that Maggie has this, Maggie runs a company that sits very far away from our company, and she can always figure out a way to kind of build a bridge between her experiences and the experiences that would be useful to me. And these are the kinds of things that I watch for people. It's not, a person who can dribble a ball really fast or shoot, it into a hole, nothing like that. It's more about these just great small points of light that I can actually latch onto a little bit. And that's what I like about people.
Well, thank you, Ursula. One of the things you mentioned was your mom, and I know you and I have had a lot of conversations about executive women, having families, being a leader at home, just like we're a leader in the office. So talk a little bit about, you've got 2 terrific kids, a great husband. Talk a little bit about that work-life balance.
The 2 terrific kids part is definitely 100% true. It depends on the day whether the husband is as terrific as. I have a great husband and 2 great kids, and early on, my husband is 20 years older than I am, and I'm famous for saying that, the best thing I did in my life was marry a man 20 years older than I was, because all the game playing and all these positioning things that couples generally go through, we didn't have to go through because he had already gone through it with his first wife, which was good. So
choosing well is important.
It's an important thing. But I have been told that I said that people should look for. That's not what I said. I just said I actually happen to be lucky enough to have one. But the thing that we found out early, my husband and I determined early, was that a child who is not successful will be with you for your entire life. So one of the most important things that we could do, and I mean this, because I have friends who are very, very wealthy, they have everything you can imagine, and they have a disaster at home. You can't avoid a disaster at home, right? So the most important thing my husband and I realized when my son and my daughter were born was that we had to have good kids. And it's not by accident that they happen. This is not, I'm really serious about this. We raise our kids in a not by walls. There are rules. There are expectations. Not every movement that they make is celebrated. They have to compete. But by the way, we love them madly, and they're both great. So I have two kids, son who's 26, and I'm going to go through this whole thing, so you have to listen. Son who's 26, he's MIT undergraduate, MIT master's, 2 degrees from MIT, an undergraduate degree in math and nuclear sciences, master's degree in nuclear sciences and math. So 4 degrees from MIT. Then
awesome.
Yeah. And now he goes to Stanford for his PhD in what they call earth sciences, which is basically geophysics. So this kid is not bad. And my daughter and he's 26, he's a really cool boy, and he is a nice,
he's
a nice
good kid.
young man. He's really a nice young man. And my daughter is 22. She's a little bit more of a challenge. She's great. She's a great student. She's a 22-year-old. She undergraduate degree in writing, graduate degree in writing right now, and she speaks her mind. She's pretty. She takes control of the world. She'll be great. She's going to get her PhD, she'll probably go to NYU to get her PhD as well. So great kids. My husband is he's like I said, 20 years older than I am. 42 years Xerox veteran, retired when my daughter was 10, and so he stayed home with the kids and raised my daughter and my son while I traveled the world. And it was one of the things that we had to decide to do, that somebody had to be home. There's a certain time when my daughter was 10, my son was 14, they could not raise themselves, so somebody had to be home, and he was the one who chose to be home, so it was good.
Yeah. Ursula and I both had husbands that were stay-at-home dads, so it really does make a huge difference in terms of how the kids turn out.
It's amazing.
You do have great kids, actually.
And so do you.
Yes.
Yeah. Maggie has 2 boys, a fireman and a consultant.
Right.
Yeah, I got it.
And I'm a new grandmother, 10 days. Woo-hoo.
10 days?
Yeah, 10 days. So speaking of creative and innovative, that's really the heritage of Xerox, and what you are trying to do is to continue to reinvent that innovation and creativity in the company on different platforms, not just technology, but also services. So talk a little bit about how you implement and foster creativity and innovation in the company.
This is, it's lead by example. And the lead by example is taking risks and being willing to fail. And if anybody knows me, they know I literally fail probably as much or more than most people would publicly do it. So it's giving permission to take chances and mess up. By the way, if you fail consistently and continuously, then you're not qualified for your job, and we have a way to manage that as well. But I mean, it's enough. It's literally leaning over the edge. A lot of it is that. It's also it's having high expectations. So, we have to inspect. If you don't inspect things, it's almost like practice. There's no scoring. And so we do try to set up structures around innovation that measures and tracks outputs. It's not always easy, particularly in creating new things. It's not always easy to do that. But it's leading by example, and it's giving shifts. One of the biggest things that we did in our company is we bought this company, another company, to branch into business process outsourcing services. And this is a hard ride, as Maggie will tell you. It's about 50% successful right now, maybe 60, 70% successful, but not totally done. And it's one of these things where after you do it, you realize, you ask yourself the question, should you have done something easier, simpler? And the simpler thing would have been to actually stay close to home for Xerox, which would have been to stay in printing and copying. The good news about printing and copying is we know how to do it totally like with our eyes closed, and we do it better than anybody else in the world. The problem with printing and copying alone is that it underutilizes all of the resources that we have as a company. And so leaning over the edge a little bit and trying to extend those resources to new areas is what we had to do. Not only me, the board. Had just become the CEO. So the previous CEO started a lot of the work. The board had to agree. I had to agree, and the management team had to lead it. But it was one of these things where we could have just stayed home, and we decided to kind of go away from home a little bit. And I think it's going to be a good thing for the company. It's already a good thing. It's going to be a great thing for the company.
So in wrapping up, based upon those comments too about what you've been through from an innovation and creative and transformation perspective, what do you want the audience to know about Xerox's future?
Yeah. So one of the things that I found out is that history matters and relationships matter. And making a decision as you go forward, if you think about your business needs, you have to think about whether or not the person that you partner with will be there with you in the long term through good or bad, and whether that person will apply their best resources to help you solve your problems, and whether if that person or company does it right, they feel great about it, but if they don't do it right, that they'll work to improve it. And one of the things I want people to know about Xerox is that we are here for the long term. We are really, really good about what we do, and we have the best people in the world to work on some of the most complex business problems. They're not easy to solve, but the reason why we're engaged in them is because, by the way, everybody will try to solve them, and many people will fail. We may fail occasionally, but more often than not, we'll succeed. You can't get a better team of people on your side. That's what we try to hire for. You can't get a better team of people on your side if you're a complex, large or small organization and Xerox team, because we will be with you all the way through, from the beginning to the end, and that's what you need as a company.
And it's true, the tone at the top really does matter, and one of the things that Ursula brings to the table at Xerox is that tone of service to the customer, service to the employee, service to the shareholder, and always figuring out a way. And they do tough stuff. Yeah. Nothing's easy. And I think because of that, they stick with whatever they have to deliver, and they make that happen. So it's been a privilege for me to spend a few minutes with you here on stage and also to be on your board.
Grandma Wilderotter.
Yes.
It's really not bad.
I'm now the chief grandmother officer, so it's a good thing. Thank you, Ursula Burns. Okay.